Larry Flynt is joining us tonight. As publisher of Hustler magazine, Larry has been at the center of free speech debates for decades, culminating in a Supreme Court case versus Jerry Falwell. A decisive win against censorship, the case established protection from lawsuits alleging emotional distress from parodies. That decision has ensured that comedians, commentators, and shows like ours can satirize public figures without fear of retribution. With that said, we are honored to welcome Larry Flynt here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Recently, Jerry Falwell passed away, and you wrote a really great op-ed in the LA Times about it, I think in the Sunday section, in the book section or the calendar section, whatever it was. I read it and I really liked it. Was Jerry Falwell a friend to you or an enemy or both?
I would say Jerry was more of an acquaintance. My mother used to always tell me that regardless of how much you dislike someone, if you meet them in person, you'll find there's characteristics about them that you like. And Falwell fit that profile very well. And I never agreed with him on any of his positions, gays and lesbians, to his pro-life position. Can't think of a single thing I ever agreed with him on, but I got to know him, and we used to do a lot of debates on college campuses and universities around the country. So what really happened is I got to know the guy without really wanting to know him. So yeah, I reached a point in my relationship where I could see him as a human being and not as this demagogue, you know. I honestly believe that a lot of things that he said, you know, he didn't really mean, but at the same time, I don't think he was intending to shock people. I mean, that was just part of his personality, but I think he did a lot of harm to the nation. I think he did a lot of harm to the Republican people. But at the same time, you know, he's a human being that's left his mark, and, you know, that's everybody who passes through life would like to be remembered for something. And I guess Reverend Falwell feels that he deserves a place in memory lane.
It'd be hard to find two people more diametrically opposed. And you did all these debates with him, and I know that you spoke fairly often. You know, when he would come to California, he'd always contact you, and when you would call him, you were put through immediately. Yeah. What common ground did you have, if any?
Well, after I beat him at the trial level, it wasn't too long after that. I think we were on a Larry King show, and that was the first contact I had with him. But a short time after that, my secretary called my office and said, Jerry Falwell just showed up reception area unannounced. I said, well, send him in. And so he came in my office over on Wilshire, and I honestly believe that he was there to bury the hatchet. I don't think, after he had plenty of time to consider it, I don't think he felt he was on the winning side of that free speech issue. Anytime someone tries to advance free speech in the wrong direction and they lose, it's a huge bonus for us who enjoy free speech and knows what it does mean. So I spent some time talking with him. You know, I've dined with him, you know, and I was probably the only guy in his entire inner circle of people who knew him. I could just tell him he was full of it, you know, and he didn't get mad at me for that. And I think he sometimes took the criticism serious, and it was probably for the better.
Well, that court case is it's so important. I think it's more important than a lot of people realize. Do you think that the importance of that case and its decision in the Supreme Court, do you think it is overlooked?
Oh, absolutely, it's overlooked. See, you gotta understand, I lost at the trial level in Lynchburg, Virginia. But the judge had instructed the jurors that if they can't find liable, they can't award damages. So what they did is they awarded all those damages on intention and infliction of emotional harm, you know. Well, had that decision been allowed to stand in federal court, because it's not state court, it's federal, what would happen is someone could sue you and they wouldn't have to prove liable. All they'd have to do is prove you hurt their feelings or their dog's feelings, you know, or their grandfather's feelings or whatever. And so it was such a bad precedent, especially when we lost at the appellate level and we lost in the Fourth Circuit, and our only hope was the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gets 8,000 cases a year and they only hear 80. So there was not much of a shot. And we weren't getting any support from the mainstream media. But fortunately, after the Supreme Court agreed to hear oral arguments, and Washington Post, New York Times, NBC, ABC, they all came in and filed amicus briefs because they all realized that now the Supreme Court had agreed to hear it, and if I lost, they were stuck with the decision. And things like the monologue on Saturday Night Live, and things you see with Jon Stewart today and Kobar and Johnny Carson, even then, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah, there'd be no Chris Rock.
Yeah, you wouldn't have parodies on people.
Yeah.
And I don't think, you know, I could have settled the Falwell case. I could have afforded to, but I wanted to fight it all the way because I wanted to win. But if I knew that I would have got as little recognition after spending $3.5 million, you know, I would have never went the distance on that case, because if people don't care any more than that about free speech, then let them defend their own concept of free speech.
Fair enough. But, you know, I think a lot of people might think that the right to parody, or, like, you know, make fun of the president or do whatever you like, they perhaps might think that was already built into the paperwork.
It's not.
I know that. I'm saying perhaps they do.
Ever since the founding of our Constitution, parody has never been protected by the Constitution under free speech. You know, so there was no protection for anybody to do parody about anyone, whether it be the president or a common person.
Right. Well, I think what we may, as Americans, we just may suffer just from some historical amnesia, or just not being able to go back farther than 3 years, or back farther than an administration. And maybe we suffer somewhat from that. Because it is, I'm so glad you did go the distance, because I wouldn't have this show in the manner I do without what you did.